All right, guys, here we are again. More questions about different things. Feel free to send me some comments and info if there's some things you want me to cover. I get a lot of people asking me about tricep work. And obviously, if you've watched any of my previous videos with other people, I do teach this a little different. One of the big things I would find is, I don't have this handle, I don't have that handle. There are so many different handle options. So I'm going to go through a couple of those for you and try and show you what's the thing to pay attention to the most. Pretty classic, easy curl bar. This one's nice and big. I'm a little bigger, longer, so sometimes that's sort of one of our challenges. If you see these handles, they put this here for a reason, and most people get caught kind of not thinking about this at all. This is what I would call a fixed handle, meaning my hands can't go anywhere, so fixed, versus a rope, which might be a mobile handle, right? And so if they gave you something here to push out on, you're here to push out on it. Now, I see a lot of people get caught in this position where they're kind of loading up on the bar. And you can see if I spent my time doing that, that's all just sort of wrist flexion, right? I'm not actually trying to do anything. And when you say to somebody, this is called a push down, then they just push down. Now, there's certainly nothing to be said that there's not going to get shoulder in there. You're not going to get tricep in there. But this motion feels like it's got to come back towards me. So that's really different than thinking I'm going to finish out in front of me. Now, the first thing I always kind of look for from a client standpoint is their grip. And the second thing is, do they let their shoulders even move? So if they don't let their shoulders move, like it's very commonly taught to ram their shoulders down, fix their shoulder blades. And you can see that that's pretty much as far as I can go. There's tricep involved. But you see how I kind of run out of room, and if I let my shoulders actually move, this ends up in a very different position. So we go from elbows facing towards you guys to eventually elbows facing out, right? So that feeling, I can't do that if my shoulders don't move. That's going to involve my collarbone and shoulder blade reorienting. And if you, again, look at gymnastics or anybody pressing, in any kind of those, you're going to see the shoulders have to move. That's one of the reasons why on those athletes, you'll see some really big developed triceps, biceps, shoulders, and pecs. Okay, so when we're going to push, this is a hook grip. I'm pushing out on this handle. And from there, I'm just trying to finish it back towards me. Okay, so there's got to be some movement of this backwards by the end. Okay, and if I let that really get there, I'm not going down anymore. I'm coming back towards me. Almost everybody has these in their gyms. Some of them are quite small. This is obviously a longer version, right? With a kind of a foot length on either side. I certainly would love this more than the little short one. But what you're feeling now is a mobile handle. You can see my shoulders are going to try and find a spot to go. But as I come down on this, it's going to want to separate. The closer I get to the bottom, if it's a short rope, it's going to feel like I get jammed in that same position. It's going to feel like I'm not worried about down anymore. It's going to feel like, oh, I got to fight. Now you're going to see lots of people that finish this exercise with this motion because their brain is trying to figure out how do I fight that, right? And so this thing coming at us, as I come down, this longer rope means, oh, it kind of comes with me. I don't have to do a lot of the stuff we were talking about before. But with a shorter rope, that's going to feel like, oh man, it really makes me come in. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with either one. Which one's the best? It's more like, how do I adjust to the piece of equipment that I'm using? Does that make sense to you guys? Right? Once again, they gave you a pretty thick rope. This is built for you to kind of curl your fingers over it. Do not start this on your palms. Okay, use your fingers, and they gave you a butt here for a reason, for you to actually push on the butt, okay? If you're pushing on the butt, that's going to jam you into that position. And sure enough, really great triceps. There's a fixed one right there. Oh my gosh. Funny part is sometimes in some trainers' gyms, you'll see a collection on the wall with all these different handles, almost like somebody kind of, like finds them and goes, oh my gosh. And it's like, why do you have all these different handles? Well, they're all different kind of angles and things for you to interact with. So now I have a 45, right-ish fixed handle. So it can't get, once again, they gave you a butt here. So it's like, oh, I'm supposed to shove on something, okay? They didn't just put that there to hang out. And so once again, I'm going to hook up over this. And again, maybe this fits me if I'm bigger or smaller, that's fine. But as this comes around, this is moving. And once again, oh, I got to get up on top of this. So one of the cues that I use with some athletes that seems to hit home is imagine you have to get up on the deck of the pool, right? You'd have to get up on the deck. That's very different than I have to push it down, okay? I have to push it down. I'm thinking about coming around a corner and ending up on top of this. If I let go, my hands would push out. Same rule of thumb here too, guys, okay? Does that make sense? So yeah, you might see traps being involved or serratus muscles being involved to reorient your elbows in a different direction. That's a very healthy thing for elbow path. I see a lot of bodybuilders with some radial ulnar kind of joint issues. And sure enough, one of the first things I see is them not being able to move their shoulders from a different direction to help that elbow finish. And in terms of tricep development, that's where you see some of the big bulk of these movements are not shoulder related. They're thinking elbow only, okay? It's not elbow only. Your shoulders having to go into extension, which is a backwards motion or an outwards motion if my shoulder's pointed over there. So once again, you kind of play with a little more potential wrist and elbow injury stuff if you actually are flexed and pressing down as opposed to pushing away. So this is one of the questions amongst the community is long head environment. What am I doing with my long head? So if I have a relative mobile handle, some people teach an overhead movement. Again, as a basic level, almost everybody that has access to cables, that's going to be where most people are going to start with tricep stuff. In terms of beginner to immediate, to intermediate, to advanced, there's going to be some volume and fit issues that you're going to see show up. Ultimately, the goal in my mind is mostly from depending on, instead of beginner to advanced, is mostly, can I get my shoulders to move? How much force can I tolerate? Do I even understand these concepts, right? Because it might say, hey, every simple push down is the most basic place to start. When we start moving to more intermediate to advanced stuff, we're talking about bigger arcs of things moving off your body. An overhead movement would be a place I would start to move into intermediate. If I started saying, I'm going to go overhead, some people will coach this from as low as a waist height. Okay. Now this is going to produce an arrow that you got to deal with that's pretty vertical. Okay. I would say that's a super advanced move and demands a huge amount of trunk control if you'd be up this high. Okay. What I might say is we could take that to shoulder height ish, shoulder height, and all of a sudden that arrow isn't so steep. And now this will feel like I'm trying to throw over my head, right? More like a soccer ball, right? And it's going to feel like I've got some kind of over top position. But if you see me coming at you guys, what do you see at the top of this? It's not my shoulder staying here. You're going to see me shrug over. And as I shrug over, we go back to look, my hands can separate. And this is now a very, very solid. My elbows are facing up and down. My elbows are now facing in and out. And that turns into, oh, this very healthy thing for that elbow and shoulder. Okay, so restraining the shoulders here doesn't seem to make any sense to me, because if you said my shoulders are up, but you try and pull your shoulder blades down, you're left with your arm potentially setting up an impingement. Okay, so if I was going to say for this beginner to intermediate, we're just getting that idea of throwing over our head, and you're going to feel quite a huge challenge out here, which most of us can probably use to feel like, oh, tricep, right? So where we don't move our shoulders. So there are a lot of bodybuilders out there and influencers out there, and there's a lot of propagated similar isms, bodybuilder isms that are, golden rule type stuff. And sometimes when historical continuity, we all do that. And so then we all know, we all stick our chest up, we all pull our shoulders down, we all fix our shoulder blades. And while it might be correct in one small window, like powerlifting as an example, there might be some ridging and positioning and stuff. that works really well with that one exercise, it gets ported into every other exercise. All of a sudden we're doing bicep curls with our chests up and our shoulders down and wondering why we have so many other issues. And so this is where kind of challenging the information, what I hope to do for you guys is challenge the information, at least from my perspective, as to why am I making these choices and how does the body move, and hopefully bridge that gap for you guys. If you choose to do what you've been doing and it works for you, awesome. But if you wonder why you might not, want to have elbow pain or shoulder pain, or spend a lot of money on therapy because you go into the gym and hurting yourself, that's one of the things I don't think most of us really want. Sometimes people ask me what are your favorite moves, or, what are the ones that put the most meat on the bone, that kind of stuff. And I would probably say that just like overhead movements, as soon as you start seeing some stuff kind of start to move off, I would say dumbbell skull crushers versus bar skull crushers, okay? That's usually a pretty big finisher for most people. One of the challenges I see is that once again, people are pinning their shoulder blades back. And as soon as you get up here and pin your shoulder blades back, you're gonna see your elbows flare, and then it looks like a dumbbell skull crusher because the dumbbell's gonna end up here with internal rotation in this position. The reality is, if my shoulders are being pushed this way when I lay down, my shoulder position, this is gonna give me all the angle that you want. But what you see is the shoulders pinned back and a piece of that joint is now pointed out towards you. So my glenoid, part of my scapula, is pointed out. There's no way I can get this position. So I start folding into internal. Now I'm doing something where it looks like I'm going across the elbow joint and feeling that doesn't feel great on my elbow, okay? Skull crushers are very famously, kind of beat up people. And they go, man, these are great, but my elbows can't handle the challenge, okay? So if I said, we're gonna go with a mobile handle, right, instead of a fixed handle, all of a sudden now I've got all this path. I have to deal with shoulder stability, but now my shoulder blades are pushing that way. And so my tricep, my upper arm is going that way. And look, the dumbbell is kind of moving in this path, not that path. I'm not trying to push up. I'm trying to push around, okay? Like I'm gonna throw a soccer ball again. Once again, my fingers have to hold something, but from here, my path, I don't see people go below tabletop. I don't really see much risk to benefit there, but my shoulders are not pinning back. What I see is the dumbbell goes down towards you, towards the floor, and their shoulder drops. When the reality is your shoulders are gonna stay forward while you finish there, okay? So my path is this way and this way, almost like a hammer, right? Hammer position, where this looks like the head of the hammer going that way, okay? Give that a try, guys. So here's the request for an overhead, right? Very classic, double or single. Now, if I make this a single, it's a mobile handle. If I make this a double, it's a fixed handle, okay? Now it's a fixed handle with a narrow grip. So I'm only gonna be able to get to here because my hands wanna separate. So now this is shoulders going up. Picture an arrow right here. Shoulders going up on your serratus for you to finish, and you can't finish because your hands have to stay attached to the fixed thing. If this is a single, now my shoulder's still going up. The dumbbell is actually moving in a path as an arc. This never stops going up. As soon as this shoulder drops, now it's the path of the dumbbell, and you can see my elbow pops way out. This is like a crowbar going over there. So from here, this is the motion. Up and over, right? No different than saying I'm coming at you, right? Give that a shot. Okay, so here's a very cool machine. Sorry guys, sometimes you're gonna yell at me for stuff you don't have. But this M-Torture French press, okay? Very, very well designed machine. Has a couple things. Play with the counterweight, otherwise this thing will crush you. What people don't realize, this is a giant teeter-totter, and this position of extreme short here, if it has the most amount of weight, then it's gonna feel like you just never wanna visit that position. So you won't visit this super extreme position, you'll just avoid it. So they gave you a counterweight to actually offset so that it's not so terrible in the hole, okay? So that's something to play with. So they gave you, again, there's an easy curl bar, kind of cool. They made this a straight. That makes it a lot easier for you to hook your fingers, but I'll see again, people show me a flexed position here, and this is actually extension, right? This is a position where I should stay extended, and lo and behold, just like the dumbbells, my shoulders are going up. This should feel like it never comes off your serratus. From here, this arrow, once it comes up, all I'm doing now is setting this up to go as high as possible, and I'm trying to push up. And lo and behold, at the top, because my hands are fixed, my shoulders are gonna have to move. My shoulders are gonna have to reorient so that the elbows go from facing relative front to facing actually in and out again, because my hands wanna separate. So I'm using this butt here to push. And if I can push out, my elbows will go in. If my elbows go in, you're straightening your arms. If you're straightening your arms, oh, that's tricep. Okay, so it never comes off this position. I am pushing up the whole time, okay? Again, so this is another fit issue, guys. So they gave us an ability to change our height to this. This doesn't move. They gave us an ability to change our depth to this, but all that's doing is moving me forward on this. So I'm not a small human. So I'm gonna give myself the most amount of room back there. But if you look down here, they gave you this. Oh my gosh. They gave you something to hook because it's actually gonna try and lift you out of the chair if it's heavy enough. They also gave us something here to adjust to a certain width and see sort of what fits you. So sometimes it's not necessarily all about how big you are, but it is really about what angle. So if we are pushing for tricep, I'm gonna try and push this off. Most people see a dip here and what's their first arrow? But if you looked here, 90 degrees to this platform is slightly forward, which means, oh, it's asking me to push my elbows towards you guys. So it's asking me to bend my elbows and press my elbows. If I worry about down, you can see that's a whole different direction. So if I was really thinking pec first, oh, I'm gonna think about up and down. But if I'm thinking about tricep, I'm thinking about backwards and forwards. And you can see there's a whole bunch of range here that I never visit because all I care about is driving my elbows backwards and pushing forwards. I'll still feel front delt. That's not a problem, right? But if I'm driving those elbows straight, wow, this feels like a great tricep movement. Here we go, guys. Sometimes I get a question about like, I feel this in my chest. I feel this in my triceps. It might be about how your body fits, right? As I said, I'm 6'2"-ish and certainly long-armed. How do I fit on this versus somebody who's much smaller than me or shorter or different proportion, or even just how do they interact with the handles? So this thing has a lot of variability. But if I was saying, hey, I end up thinking the words up and down here. Up and down all of a sudden becomes like maybe pec related. Maybe I start feeling my pecs. But somebody else starts thinking in and out and in and out. And all of a sudden they're like, oh, I feel my triceps more, okay? Somebody changes their handle position and decides up and down, and this becomes a pec exercise very quickly. Somebody decides backwards and forwards, and my pec doesn't have to work that hard, but boy, my elbows are dealing with something at my triceps. Yeah. So for a lot of people, they think the machine, so I would argue that there's a lot of exercises out there that are taught more like recipes, okay? And so if I look here and I don't know what this machine does, I look over and I find a plate and I see a person and they have little red spots totted in there and go, oh, I guess this is for chest. And I sit on the machine and I hope when I do it, I feel what I'm supposed to feel. And I got the cake recipe, I got chest. On some level, they're not wrong, but how we interact with this equipment and fit on it is not as simple as that little plate on the side. So if you think before you get on, I should feel chest, what does my chest do? My chest squeezes in. My chest can think about this up and down. My elbows move in and out. That's very different. My elbows move forward and backward. If I decide I want to use those things, I'm going to try and mimic those motions and see, does this machine fit me for that?